Good morning.
Good morning.
Just gotta get a few things in place. Whew, slow start today.
Mhm.
How are you doing, Troy?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. What an
I had
amazing essay. Oh my
oh,
gosh.
thank you. I've spent a lot of energy on it. I had a really full day yesterday. I pretty much ate all day long from like when I woke up until I went to bed because I had two different going away parties.
Mm.
I had like a going away kind of brunch thing, and then I had like a going away dinner thing, and then I'm having another going away dinner tomorrow night. So everybody wants to say goodbye to me, and everybody wants to eat while they do it.
Oh, well, at least they could take a bite of their food,
Yeah.
not so much of you. Hi. Good morning, Mark and Ruth Ann.
Good morning,
Mm.
everybody.
Good morning, and I'm gonna eat while so I'll stay.
Okay, just finishing a late breakfast.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my
Mm.
tea time. Where are you headed, Troy?
I'm moving to California on Thursday, if you can believe it.
What part of California?
Southern California in Ventura.
Oh, is it a job, a person? What sends you there?
My partner just landed a pretty good job there, so we're relocating.
Yay.
And I'm just gonna get a job. I'm eventually gonna go back to school, and become a teacher. But yeah.
Oh, good.
But I've been wanting to move out west for a few years now. So
Mhm. Well, you can still zoom in to us.
oh, I plan on it. I love this class.
Oh, good. Good, good. Well, we've enjoyed having you here.
Thank you.
It'll be early for morning minion if you ever want to join. I
Yeah,
tried to do that from New Mexico. 6:30 in the morning is a little bit tough for me. So 5:30 in California would really be hard.
yeah. I think 11 would be 7 a.m. there, but I'm gonna try to make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, 11 is 8, 3
Oh,
hours.
8. Okay. Oh, well,
Yeah,
that's better.
right. Yeah. Right,
I
awesome. Yeah.
I would like to find a synagogue there, but there aren't any Reconstructionist ones. They're just the main three.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. I'll see.
Good luck. It's worth the search.
Yeah.
There may be groups that are not as publicized.
Yeah.
And I see it
Yeah.
at 7 o'clock, so I will mute. Good luck.
All right. Um, just waiting for Rabbi Richard to join us. Welcome everybody else who's here. Aaron, Jason, maybe Adam, Julia, Victor, and McKenna. I don't know if you have both of you, but happy to see both your faces. Mindy, good to see you, and Susan, Louise, nice. We are growing. Stuart, beautiful. We'll just give another minute for people to gather.
Thanks for sending the pictures of the synagogues, which I really enjoyed looking at. They were very beautiful and interesting. So thanks for doing that.
You're welcome. I mean, the range is so extraordinary. You really
Incredible.
get that kind of Moorish look for the ones that were built in the late 1800s, in Europe, but they are just so magnificent. And you really get that sense of wanting to copy the magnificent cathedrals, etc., that are in those cities and all. Yeah. And then those sweet, I don't know if people got a chance to see the sub-Saharan African synagogues. I just read the most fascinating article about the Igbo in Nigeria, who are some thousands of them have been declaring themselves Jewish and practicing Judaism and building synagogue. It is fascinating what's going on. I'm going to just quick check my email to see if Rabbi Richard is delayed for something. Don't know. Um, okay, not sure, but I think we're going to begin. So if you would look at the chat and let's join hands, as it were, on our screens and say the blessing over Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Great. Actually, I think maybe we'll begin with that because one of the things we wanted to talk about today was the blessing, the notion of blessing in Judaism. And I think you got a little bit of sense of that from one of the readings. Just how important the blessings are. They are kind of the basic building block of most of Jewish prayer. And sorry, gonna just get rid of that. Okay. I think that was Richard. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay. Will you give me a moment and I will just contact him? I'm so sorry. What a mess. Here we go. Here he is again. Hello. Sorry about that. We just got a little technical difficulty and with getting into the Zoom, but I think this should work. Okay. So in that case, let me step back from the blessings and we'll leave that for the end of the class. Rabbi Richard is going to start with a few explorations about prayer in Judaism and finding a synagogue, finding a community that feels right, and all the ways in which you have choice and options in Judaism. One of the beauties of pluralism and the proliferation of denominations, movements in Judaism is the number of choices we have. If you're like me, nothing is ever quite right? You'll never find a congregation, this davening, the praying, that is absolutely right. Because for me, it changes week by week how I want to pray and how I want to daven. So it's very hard to ever find a community that's going to catch it exactly right. But let me turn to Rabbi Richard now and welcome him. And Richard, if you'll take it away.
I will take it away. Good morning, everybody, and sorry for the Zoom interference. So our topic this morning is synagogues and prayer. And it may seem that these two facets of Jewish life are tightly related. As I hope we can explore together, I think that the relationship between synagogues and prayer are a little more loose, a little more supple maybe than it seemed that they might be when we first thought about them. Synagogue is a word of Greek origin, and it's fascinating to me that the Greek seems to translate something from Hebrew. A very common name for a synagogue in Hebrew is Beit Knesset, place of gathering, house of gathering, which is exactly the Greek etymology of synagogue. It's a meeting place. I think this is interesting to note because synagogues existed while our temples in Jerusalem, the central places where God was present with our ancestors. Synagogues existed in the time of the temple as places farther away from Jerusalem and in the diaspora after the destruction of the first temple, where people would gather for various purposes, including but not limited to prayer. After the destruction of our temples, when we no longer had that kind of central place where we met God and God met us, synagogues sprung up all over the world in ancient times, in places like Italy, far away from Israel, in our times all over the world. And they continue to be places where we meet. There are many different kinds of synagogues, depending on religious affiliation, culture. So in places like New York or Los Angeles, where there were large Jewish communities, there are Persian synagogues and Bukharan synagogues and Ashkenazic synagogues for the majority of US Jews who trace our ancestry to Eastern Europe, and Sephardic synagogues for the 5% of US Jews who trace their ancestry to Spain and Italy and Greece and parts of Yugoslavia, and their descendants, where the styles of prayer, the culture, the food at the oneg after Shabbat is a little bit different. The languages may be a little different. Synagogues, Batei Knesset, can be different depending on a style of worship. Some relatively large and formal, some smaller and more informal, kind of like Kol Ami. What do people come to synagogues for, to Batei Knesset for? We come to pray, certainly, for religious services, but also for all kinds of other purposes, for learning together like we're doing this morning. So in a broad, expansive definition of a synagogue, you're in one right now. This is a shul, a synagogue. They're places to be in community, to hang out. They're places to socialize. They're places to get help and counsel when you want it, when you need it. They're places where we do projects together to repair the world. Most synagogues, unlike Kol Ami, have a building, have a home. Sometimes the home is someone's living room. Sometimes the home is a gathering outdoors, like we'll be doing together in a few weeks for the holiday of Lag BaOmer. And sometimes, like at Kol Ami, it's folding chairs in a church basement. They're all beautiful. They all serve a purpose. The founder of Reconstructionism, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, was fond of saying that being Jewish was first about belonging to a Jewish community, being part of a holy community, a gathering. Secondarily, it was about behaving like a Jew, marking the cyclic holidays and different times of the year. Believing in something in common was good when it happened, but it was number 3 in line after belonging. A synagogue can be a place where you belong. Different from many Christian faith traditions, Jews don't have an assigned, quote, parish, unquote. So in the Catholic Church, if you live somewhere, that's a church where you go to. Not that every Catholic follows that rule, but that's what the rule is. In Judaism, we don't have a rule like that. People choose the kind of place where they go to have a synagogue home. What works for you, where you feel comfortable and welcome, where you're among like-minded people, where you can make good and deep and enduring friendships. Now, there's a lot of different words for synagogues. One that very often is used is a Yiddish word. Yiddish is the language of the Jews of the former Eastern Europe and other parts of the, quote, Western, unquote, Jewish world. And in Yiddish, a synagogue is called a shul. I spent time on the internet trying to look for the precise distinction between synagogue and shul. I didn't find a good one on the internet. I only found one here in my heart and here in my belly. Shul is a homey word. It's a comfortable word. It's a familiar word. It's where I go not just to pray, because a Jew can pray anywhere, as we'll talk about, but where I go to pray, where I know other people and other people know me. Shul carries that connotation. It's also a place where the food is really good, where the challah after Shabbat services is often homemade and especially delicious because it's made with particular love. It's a place where I've learned some of the most important things I've ever learned in my life. And for me, it's the center of my life. It's where Jim had his bar mitzvah. It's where there was a group of people who showed up in my home when I was mourning my mother. It was the place I got married. That's irreplaceable. To me, that's carried in the word shul. And synagogue, I'm like multilingual, so it's okay. I know what the word means, but shul is something different. One word that some Jews use for a synagogue is a temple. And not all Jews sit comfortably with that word, and many do. The word actually arose in Germany in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, where the Reform movement in Judaism, which has done wonderful things, making a home for many Jews and fighting for social justice, they wanted to make the point to other Germans that the Jewish faith was like every other faith. And so they built synagogues that looked majestic in some of the ways that churches did. To fit in, some synagogues in Reform synagogues in Germany went so far as to celebrate Shabbat on Sunday and not on Saturday. And they chose the word temple to convey that Judaism was a faith like any other faith. There's a history, a proud history behind that, and one that not everybody shares. So if you were ever wondering about that word, that's the history of it, and it has its own contemporary reality. Many Jews have memories of synagogue life that are not always easy, sometimes exclusionary within in-group and in out-group. sometimes not welcoming. But I want to tell 2 one-minute vignettes that capture to me what a synagogue can be and what people can make it be. In the town where my parents lived for many years, there were 2 synagogues, the one they went to and the other one that they never went to. The other one was more modest. It was frayed around the edges. And my parents didn't feel comfortable with the style of working there. But that synagogue had a daily minyan, a group of 10 Jews, at least 10 Jews, who met every single day of the year. New England blizzard or not, the minyan was there. They had done it for many, many years. And this group of people showed up so that the few prayers that could only be said with the group of 10 adult Jews could be said, and anyone who wanted to come could come. When my mother passed away, I went to that town, which I hadn't been to in many years, and I was pretty bereft. And a cousin, knowing that I was a Reconstructionist and religious, said to me, "Don't worry, I'll take you to Minyan." Every morning, early in the morning, she came to my house and gave me a ride. And I was able to say Kaddish, the memorial prayer, with that minyan. I was welcomed in as if I'd been going there my whole life. And after the service, people would gather for coffee and bagels. And a line that I'll never forget is this one older guy. Now I'm an older guy. Back then, he was the older guy. Said, "I'm sorry for your loss. Have a bagel." And he sliced a bagel for me and poured me a cup of coffee. That's what a synagogue can be. Very different 1-minute story. I don't often talk about my professional work with patients, but for this one, I have permission. I was seeing a man who was developing dementia. He was losing his memories, losing his mind. He was a decent, hardworking man. He kept all of his feelings inside. His family sent him to psychotherapy because he got angry for the first time in his whole life. Yom Kippur was coming, the holiest day of the Jewish year, the Day of Atonement. And we were talking, and I asked him what that time of the year was like for him in a way that was totally uncharacteristic of him. He told me that he had grown up in a small city with a small, tight Jewish community. And the local synagogue, there was only one, was the center of his life. He learned to pray there. He played basketball there. He celebrated holidays with his family and his friends and his whole community. It was amazing. He brought this whole world to life, and it was centered on a synagogue. And it turned out he wanted someone to remember his memories of his synagogue upbringing before he passed away. And so that's what he did. And it left him at great peace. And he passed away 2 weeks later. That's what I hope your affiliation with the synagogue, for those of you to whom the thought appeals, either as Jews or as Jew adjacent righteous people who dwell among Jews. That's what I hope it can be for you. And so now, prayer. Jewish prayer can certainly happen in a synagogue and also happen in the woods. For some people, it happens when they swim daily laps or take walks around the neighborhood. It can happen in a quiet, personal moment. There were just a few prayers that are traditionally said in what's called a minyan, a group of 10 adult Jews. Who composes a minyan? You've been in this class for a year, so you know everything's a discussion in Judaism. Some say it excludes non-Jews who want to come to pray with Jews. Some say, hopefully fewer and fewer by the minute, that it excludes females and excludes trans people, some trans people. Kol Ami says, and I say, it includes everyone who wants to come and pray and is old enough to know what they're doing. Inclusion is a very proud principle at Kol Ami and in an increasing number of Jewish communities everywhere. Traditionally, Jewish prayer is said 3 times a day, every day. Kol Ami is rare among progressive and liberal congregations. We meet for prayer, sometimes in person, often also or only on Zoom, 4 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Sunday mornings, and more these days, every Shabbat. Sometimes coming to a service is a little alienating, a little, what's going on here? I don't know the prayers. This isn't familiar to me. I don't know as many people as some others do. Come anyways, because the way you learn what prayer can do for you is by doing it. There's a line about this in the Talmud. It says that if people are praying in the synagogue and you're somehow connected in whatever way you are to the community and you're not there, God goes looking for you, wants to see how you're doing, wonders why you're not there. So all of you are welcome to join our daily minyan anytime you like, and certainly to come on our often very memorable Shabbats. One of the ways Jewish prayer is different from prayer in many other faith traditions is that we have what's called keva. Just say that word after me, unmuted, keva.
Keva.
Never.
Keva.
It's getting there. One more time. Keva
Keva.
and kavana.
Kavana.
Havana.
Havana.
Kavana. We'll explain the words. Keva is the text of a prayer. And it's not like you can't pray a prayer without a text. But there's text to many of our prayers, most of our prayers. It was written, composed by committees, you could say, of ancient rabbis a long time ago, more than a millennium ago. And it's things that with different variations, Jews have said all over the world every day for more than a millennium, much more. There's a fixed text, not because those are the only words that are okay with God, but because they capture so much. Kavanah is the particular intention you bring to your prayers. I am way over time. I'm rushing through. What's the way in? A great way to begin is with blessings. We've gone over a few of them together and won't go over them now, but we could do that in talks with me or Rabbi Gila. You can find out on your own lots of ways. Start with the simplest blessing. You eat something, bless it. You see something wonderful, bless it. Might have told before that one of our members had an uncle who was very fond of blessings and very fond of Chinese food. And he would begin his blessing over Chinese food with the traditional formula you've learned, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, God, spirit of the all time and space. So his blessing would be Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Chinese food. It's a bilingual blessing. But the thing about it is that it worked. It made Chinese food even more special than it already is. You are always welcome to pray the personal prayers of your heart. You have something you want to tell God, ask God. You don't need a formula. You don't need to learn a formula first. But if you get into learning, and it takes time, the keva of the prayers, and bring your kavanah to the keva will tell you all kinds of amazing things. And that's 15 minutes and 22 minutes, a very Jewish notion of time.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Richard. Beautiful, beautiful. And I do want to pick up on a number of the themes, including the blessings. But just a kind of, again, another brief overview, a different way in to the synagogue experience by Ruth Ann. Have a good week. So you've had a chance to look at different synagogues from around the world, and some of you have been to a variety of synagogues. Let's talk a little bit about what is common to them. Clearly not the architecture, because the architecture of synagogues picks up on whatever architecture is around in that society. So synagogues in Spain or other North African countries will look very much like a mosque. Synagogues in Northern European countries will look like the cathedrals or large or Protestant churches. Synagogues in Africa, as we've seen, look a lot like small churches in Africa. So what is similar? What do you find in almost any synagogue? Not a rhetorical question. Please unmute or throw it in the chat.
It centers around the Torah, like architectural or structurally. It's always the Torah. The ark is at the center.
Yes, right,
or
exactly.
Center of focus.
Exactly. The ark, which holds the Torah, is the central focal point. Excellent. What else?
Bima.
The bima, right? A raised platform. Now that platform can be on the eastern wall of the synagogue so that people face east when they are davening. Everybody know the word davening? It's a Yiddish word for praying, and I can't help it. It just slips out every time. So when you're facing east, right, which is the location of Jerusalem, but that's a very Ashken normative kind of statement. So people in other parts of the world don't necessarily face east. Well, I think it's not clear exactly how they.
I think it's a
David?
facing east thing because most Jews resided to the west of Jerusalem, even in antiquity.
Yes, that's right. Even when but there were Jews certainly in Babylon, a very strong Jewish presence in Arabia. It's a little hard to know. I don't know, but we should look that up, whether nowadays, whether it's still east facing because of tradition or whether the Jews in Africa, face northeast, or Jews in Iraq, if there's any left now. I don't know how many face west.
I've read that they face east also because there's a tradition that the Messiah will come from the east.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
And that's also why a lot of Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches face east, because they believe that Jesus will return from the east as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think of it more as facing the where the temple was, sort of orienting toward Jerusalem and the temple. Yeah. But yes, also
okay,
where
so
the Messiah
confirms that if you are east of Jerusalem, you face west.
Okay. All right.
My bad.
So in Sephardic synagogues, the bima is the Torah is in the same location, but there's a kind of stand in the middle of the. It's like theater in the round. There's a stand in the middle where the davening is led from, so that everybody is kind of surrounding that platform. But what else is there? There's an ark and a Torah and.
There's a Ner Tamid,
Yes, a Ner Tamid, which is, Susan, what is it?
the light, the eternal light.
Eternal light, right? So a light that doesn't go out, right? Symbolizing God, symbolizing continuity, symbolizing the sacrificial rite that occurred in the temple, all of that. What else? What's common? Not necessarily in every synagogue, but common?
Sidurim.
Sidurim, right, absolutely. Prayer books, right? So the prayer book of that country, usually with a translation into the vernacular in that country. What else? It's another book that people usually are able to pick up in a synagogue, the Sidur and the Chumash. Right.
Oh, Chumash.
A machzor that's a good one. So on high holidays, the machzor is the high holiday prayer book. And so it replaces the regular Sidur. It is a Sidur, but it's a special one. But also for Shabbat purposes, a Chumash. So you may have seen our Chumash. Sorry about that. I should have had my props ready, but here's we use a Eitz Chaim Chumash. Chumash comes from the word chamesh, which means like a chamsa, it means 5. And that's the number of books in the 5 books of Moses. So it's the Torah in a study form, right? So that people can follow along the Torah reading. And our Chumashim have translations into English and commentaries and all kinds of notes as well. So those are the 2 books that you're most likely to find. What else might you find? Kippot, right? A kippah, a head covering. Talitot, good, right? A talit, a talis, a prayer shawl, right, that one can take usually and put on, and they're available for people to use. Some traditions, like more Orthodox traditions, have the custom that you don't wear one until you're married, and only men wear one. But in our community, talit is available to everybody after bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah age, essentially. Anything else?
Tefillot.
What might say again?
Tefillot.
Tefillot.
Yeah, tefillot.
Like tefillin.
Tefillin, yeah.
Yeah. So tefillin are the prayer boxes that people wear on weekday mornings on their arm and on their heads. And those tend to be, you'll find them on people. They don't usually have extras around sometimes, but they're usually more considered personal items, and so people they don't usually have a stash of them. But yes, you'll see those in more traditional congregations on a weekday. Trying to think if there's anything else, motifs, themes.
I think there a lot of synagogues have lists of people who have died that have donated money or that are considered elders of the synagogue or important.
That's
so
right.
They have a memorial wall.
Jews are really good at plaques. Yes. We have plaques galore. Acknowledging people.
Yes,
all right. So what? Yes?
I think what she meant was the
a yahrzeit wall.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. So there's a wall with names of those who have died, and sometimes lights that are put on when there's a yahrzeit of the anniversary of somebody's death. All right, so here you're looking at a classic Sephardi synagogue, where you can see the stand. There's a stender, an amud, it's called in Hebrew, for reading, a table. It could be a slightly raised table for reading the Torah. That, of course, you're going to have at least one Torah, mostly in synagogue. Sometimes many Torahs. Trying to think if there's anything else distinctive. Very, very often, although for some reason not in these that I'm showing you, you'll see the 10 Commandments over the ark.
Star of David.
Sometimes Star of David, yes, and a menorah is another. The candelabra is another theme, like to kind of bring in the symbolism of the temple of old. Say again? Mechitza, good. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, so many of these you'll see there's an upper gallery. That's not just for overflow seating. That's for women. And sometimes in Orthodox synagogues, very often you'll also have a mechitza on the ground. A mechitza means a divider, a separation between men and women. That's only true in the Orthodox tradition. Others have done away with that.
I have a friend who's part of like the last conservative synagogue on the East Coast that still uses one.
Oh, is that right? Which one? Do you know the name?
Not exactly. I know it's in this area now.
What do they use? Sorry.
They use the gender divider that you find in more Orthodox synagogues, and I have a friend where her synagogue still uses it, even though they are a conservative synagogue, mostly because I think their major breaking point with Orthodox Judaism was women as rabbis.
Yeah. The conservative movement was not united behind the changes that it made in the 80s, and that has led to a lot of internal discussion and arguments, etc., and different practices. Yes, that's right. Okay. Any questions or thoughts about other things that you've encountered at a synagogue? You may encounter somebody welcoming you. You may not, right? Some places are more welcoming than others. David, what?
Security
these days. Oh my gosh. Unfortunately, that is so true. So common these days. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I've noticed in some of these synagogues, the bima is facing the congregants, almost like on a stage from the front, and everything happens up front. But then in some of them, there'll be like a platform with the bima on it in the center and facing the same direction as the ark. So is there like a Sephardic Ashkenazi difference?
That's what I was alluding to before, but I don't think I explained it very well. Yes. So Sephardic tradition is to have the amud, the place where you pray from, in the center. And the reading of the Torah from there, as well as the davening is led from there. And you're facing the ark as well, instead of facing the kahal. Kahal is the word for the congregation. So that you're not in a performance, so that you're kind of, in a sense, all of the congregation is getting channeled through you toward God, toward the ark, right? But you're not like so a different orientation. And you will see often at Orthodox Ashkenazi congregations that even though there is a bima, a raised platform, the person who is leading the service will still be facing toward the ark rather than facing out to the congregation. I don't know why you would read Torah facing the ark. It's not like, if you assume God wrote the Torah, I don't think God needs to hear it again, like if people need to hear it. So I don't get that part of it, but I've fought that battle too long. I'm letting it go. Okay. All right. So lots of so much to say in each of these areas. Each thing has customs and all. Even wearing a kippah can be very loaded. If you go to Israel, the kippah basically signifies your socio-religious status and what community you're part of. Here, it's a little bit more, people don't wear kippot, yarmulkes, very often in the street unless you're Orthodox. So there's just a different valence. But in Israel, all different styles of kippot have tremendous signification. All right, so why do people pray? What is that about?
Connection, communion with God.
Connection, communion with God. What else?
Being communal with each other.
Yes, okay. Being in communication with each other, lifting one's voices together in song, for example. Yes, so important. You know, in Judaism, it's okay to pray on your own, perfectly good. But if you're praying with a minion of 10 people, your prayers have a little extra boost, right? They're considered to have extra energy that kind of lift them a little bit higher. Connection to our own spirit, right? So the word for prayer, lehit palel in Hebrew, to pray, is a reflexive verb, which means to kind of to introspect, right? To kind of judge oneself in a way, to have a stance of looking inward. And so in many ways we are praying just to hear what it is our prayer is, right? And to really touch those places that are reaching out but are sometimes squelched by everything going on.
Someone once, I read online once that the verb for to pray in Hebrew uses the reflexive construction.
Yes. Yes, I think I mentioned that just now. Lehit palel is to self-reflect.
Yeah, sorry,
Right?
I done
Yeah,
that for
no,
a second.
absolutely. But you know, prayer is also for asking for things, right? Petitionary prayer is one of the ways of our tradition, right? The whole Amidah, which is said 3 times a day, the prayer, the central prayer. Now, if you go to services on Shabbat you have everything you need. At least that's the take. So you just pray for, you know, for peace and all those grand things. But on a weekly everyday prayer, you're praying 3 times a day for very specific things, for material things, for prosperity, for food, for a good agricultural year, for judges that are wise and not corrupt, and for healing for people who are in need of healing. You're praying for very things of the world, right? You're asking, and a lot of your prayers are really leading up to that point where you feel like, okay, I have the right, I have the proper religious stance. I can ask, I can put it out there, what it is that I am in need of. And sometimes you're praying one of the last blessings of those 18 Amida blessings, which just says, listen to me, Shema, Kolena, like just listen to my voice, you know, whatever it is. Okay, so lots of other things. Thanksgiving, you know, to pour out praise and wonder at the world. All of these reasons for prayer. Sometimes to find direction, right? To kind of just come to a still place where you can see where the next step is in one's life. So many different reasons for prayer. I'm going to jump us into blessings because this is one of the ways in which Jews not only does it do blessings form the backbone in a sense of our liturgy. So the Amida is 18 blessings, and they're each like a paragraph long, but they begin or end with the blessing formula that we're about to look at. If you read the article that I sent around, you got the sense of a blessing as you know, not only the basic building block, but a kind of theological statement that we can bless God, right? So what does that mean, to bless God? So some people will sometimes translate a blessing as praised are you, O Lord our God, right? Or we acknowledge you, O Lord our God. But I feel like a blessing has something more to it than that, right? It is a kind of a stance in the world that says God needs our blessing as well as we need God's blessings, right? We need to acknowledge it's a kind of, for me, it's a kind of closing a circuit. Uh, you know, that there's a flow of blessing into the world, but that we need to do our part to complete that circuit so that that flow can continue, right? We call it sometimes the shefa, the flow of blessing from God into the world, and the way in which you are able to partake of all those blessings that we have every day, hundreds and thousands of blessings. The way in which you're able to do that is by reciting a blessing and giving that intentionality back, and so completing that flow of blessings. I'm just going to quick catch Mindy's question. Victor and McKenna, to acknowledge God is to acknowledge ourselves and our connection. Exactly. Beautiful. Beautifully said. I like Troy's also. Being in the image of God, the more you reflect upon yourself, you can catch a better glimpse of God too. Is the minyan a requirement or a policy? So you can pray with fewer than 10, but there are certain prayers, as Richard mentioned earlier, that are called Devarim Shebikdusha, things that are filled, imbued with holiness. So the Kaddish prayer, the Kedusha prayer, the Baruch Hu, those are the main prayers in the liturgy that require a minyan. Now, sometimes, you do what you have to. Baruch Hu Kaddish and the Kedusha. So in the repetition of the Amida, the Kedusha, the whole, like Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Yes. I have to say that when I was saying Kaddish for my aunt some years ago, I moved mountains to get to services on time. I was coming in from Philadelphia. I raced across town to get to Addis, Israel, and they had only 4 people for a Sunday afternoon minyan. And I wanted so much to say Kaddish for this beloved aunt. And the service leader who was there at the time, he looked around, he said, we are here in order to form a community to say Kaddish, and we are going to say Kaddish. And I have to say that I remember from so many years ago, it was so dear to my heart that he was willing to make an enormous exception, because it meant so much to the people present, myself included. So yes, a minyan 10 is needed, but sometimes if you have 9, we say God is one, and that's our 10th. Jews are never that good at math, So, all right, I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to look at blessings, a little bit of traditional study of what are the blessings. So there's 3 kinds of blessings in Judaism. Blessings of enjoyment, like Birchot Nehanim, where you just partake of the world and you say a bracha. Bracha is a kind of Ashkenazi pronunciation of the word beracha, Baruch, the same root. It means to bless, a blessing. And so the formula is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. And that's the basic opening 6 words that begin every traditional Jewish blessing. Now, there's a lot of problems. I think maybe we've talked about this. Just about every single word in this 6 words is masculine. Okay, so either directly masculine or super masculine, like king of the world, or Adonai is Lord. So all of these terms are masculine, and so there's been work in the last 3 decades, I would say, to open up other ways of blessing God that are not so masculine. Sometimes people use Marcia Falk's blessing, which is nivarech, let us bless, rather than masculine, you are blessed are you. And other terms, instead of melech, instead of king of the world, maybe ruach haolam, spirit of the world. So lots of possibilities here, and we can spend some time on that in the future. But here you get things like the blessings over food, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, so before you eat bread, and then that covers your entire meal. Or when you make kiddush and you bless wine or grape juice, creator borei pri hagafen, creator of the fruit of the vine. And there are 6 of these different food blessings. So the creator of the fruit of the tree and of the ground. And then for all kinds of food, but miscellaneous foods or mixtures of food. So those are also in place. And there's others as well, not just food blessings. There's blessing over spices, etc. Then there's a blessings before carrying out a mitzvah, a commandment, a teaching, a connecting thing that we do, behavior. So the same words, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, but then we continue with Asher kitshanu, who has made us holy, b'mitzvotav, with his commandments, with mitzvot, vitzivanu, and commanded us to, and then you fill in the chatima, it's called, the ending of the blessing. And that can be, like we just recited earlier this hour, to engage in the study of Torah, to lift up your hands when you're washing them, to light the Shabbat candles, to wave the lulav, all kinds of mitzvot of practices. Now, interestingly, what does not take a blessing is giving tzedakah, is giving charity. Why would that be? Anybody want to venture a guess?
I've always wondered that, actually. I've always wanted to know the answer to that.
Yeah. David? It's a blessing already. Beautiful.
Well, I was thinking that's something done for another person, not for God.
That's right. That's right. Nice, very nice too. Yes, and so it, the blessing kind of, you do it before you do the act. So in a way, it's like interposing something between you and the person that you are connecting with. And even if it's blessing God, it's in a way, I don't know, maybe self-serving, or somehow taking care of your spiritual needs before you give the. So I think it's problematic. Adam?
Perhaps without the blessing, it allows it to be more spontaneous. And the fact that, like, it may without the blessing, it kind of removes a barrier to committing it.
Yeah.
It's like tzedakah can be like small acts that you do like in everyday life. So
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
why have to go through like the trouble of receiving a blessing when simply just committing that act already is on your own?
Right. As Victor and McKenna said, it's a blessing itself. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing to ponder. Other things that don't take blessings, like giving birth to a child, for example. Now that could be because the rabbis, just couldn't handle that. It was a little too graphic for them, perhaps, or, but also, it also was so dangerous for women and so full of pain for women that maybe they felt, people have speculated that it wasn't appropriate to require women to make a blessing at a time when they experience enormous pain. So lots of interesting things in this area. So, but let me just go back through the third of our blessings. These are the blessings of thanksgiving and praise. And these are the ones that you'll find in the liturgy, in the Siddur. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. They begin that way. And you'll see things like Ga'al Yisrael, who has delivered Israel, or Yotzer Ha'adam from the wedding ceremony, where we have 7 blessings to bless the couple. So lots of different ones like that. And as I mentioned before, the Amida has 18 or 19 blessings all in a row put together. Questions about this or about anything else?
So when you're praying, for example, Shacharit in the morning, if you're just by yourself, you should make sure not to say Baruch Hu and Kaddish and the little Kedusha section, and you just skip over those items.
Yeah.
As well.
And if you go through the Amida, you'll see there's a blessing about God's holiness that starts Atah Kadosh, which is recited instead of the Kedusha, because the Kedusha is only recited in a minyan.
Oh, interesting. In the
Now, let me just mention the other reason why we have a minyan is to read Torah. So Torah is only read aloud with the minyan.
Oh, I see.
And so Torah is read on Shabbat morning, Shabbat afternoon, Monday morning, and Thursday morning. And so those are also require minyan.
So I was looking at a video on YouTube of this man praying Shacharit, and I think he was probably Orthodox or conservative or something. because he was saying things that I couldn't find in my Siddur. I was trying to like follow along. But he went into this long tachanun
Ah, yes.
where he
Yes.
sat down and laid his head on his arm. And I
Yeah.
was wondering, like, what is that? And
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's largely missing from non-Orthodox Siddurim, although there may be a little remnant of it. So Tachanun was basically, you know, you have to think about Jews going through the last couple thousand years, very often being subject to oppression and peril. You know, just pretty tough lives, frankly. In addition to, you know, the difficulties of any life, but as Jews. And so it's interesting that the most of the Jewish prayer service is pretty focused on wonder, on praising God, you know, on just appreciating all the goodnesses that have come to us. And you kind of wonder, where was their outlet for all of the angst and the anguish and the sorrows, the troubles that they had. And so it finds its place in Tachanun. We in America haven't needed it very much in the last whatever 70 years, but I think we may be wanting to bring it back. So these originally were prayers that were said prostrated on the floor. Tachanun itself means supplication. And these are, it's like, in the traditional Orthodox, it's like 13, 15 pages of like pouring your heart out over how difficult things are. And so we have like remnants of it in the Siddurim that we use, but it's a very passionate and we don't prostrate anymore on the floor, but we do, for part of it, rest our hand on our, like in a kind of a lowly posture of like, please just help us.
Have you ever witnessed any more progressive Jews or communities or minions like kind of revive it or bring aspects or gestures of it into like the modern experience?
So you'll find, like in a conservative synagogue, you know, you'll in morning minyan. It's not done on Shabbat or holidays or any time when there's a simcha, but you'll see it in morning minyan, even in conservative synagogues, that there is a tachanun every day after the Amida. I also remember I published an article about Tachanun in my old journal called Kerem. And I just recently on Ritual Well saw that there's a 4-part series on Tachanun starting up in May. So if you're interested, you may want to explore that some further.
I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, it is a fascinating practice. Yeah. So, so much more to say, but we're going to leave it here for now. Although if you're up for staying on, we're going to invite you to continue the discussion and questions. We have one more session on May 15th. That's in 2 weeks. And then we have a plan for dinner together on May 22nd at Atman's Deli. This is a pilgrimage I'm looking forward to. I've never been. I think it's in Potomac or Rockville. I'm not sure.
Potomac, yeah.
Potomac. Okay. So please let us know if you can make that so we'll know how many people to tell them are coming. And feel free to invite significant others and let's celebrate together a year of wonderful studying. I want to say a big mazel tov and bon voyage to Troy. Troy, want to say a word or two what's happening this week?
Oh my gosh. A whirlwind is happening this week. That's what's happening. So tomorrow, I'm going to be officially finishing this leg of my Jewish journey. I've been kind of on this conversion path for like about 2 years now. And so tomorrow I'm going to be like receiving Hatafat Dumbrit, and then I'm going to immerse in the mikvah, going to recite the Shema, going to be before the Beit Din and all that. So I'm really, really excited and looking forward to all that. It's going to be a very sweet moment. And on Thursday, I'm moving to California.
So
it's a busy week.
So you're doing all this and then abandoning us.
What? I'm sorry. What'd you say?
You're doing all of this to join the community over here, and then you're abandoning us.
Abandoning us.
Yeah.
But Troy has offered. Troy has very graciously offered to talk with anybody who's interested in conversion and just to discuss how this process goes and how he's experienced it.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that any of you who just, I don't know, want somebody to talk to about things or ask questions or whatever. I did a lot of this just by myself, bouncing here, bouncing there, meeting this rabbi, it not working, going to this rabbi, it not working. And, it was hard. And if I could just be a remedy for that for somebody else, that'd be great. I would feel good about myself.
Thank you. That's really wonderful. And we wish you all the best. And we
Mazel
hope we'll
tov, Troy.
truly,
But I'm
truly
sure
mazel tov.
you all will still see me because I love this class. I love all of you, and I'm gonna try to get on when I can for the class and maybe minions or something. So I'm sure you'll see me. I just won't be on this coast.
Right. Okay. So we also want you to start thinking about what you might want to study in the future next year, and whether your folks are interested in becoming B mitzvah, having a bar or bat or B mitzvah, whatever that might look like, and it's a very wide open option, but it's the next level of study, or there's many possibilities. So do let us know. Drop either Rabbi Richard or me a line, and let us know where you'd like to go next after we finish this wonderful year of learning. On Shabbat, June 18th, where it's called New Member Shabbat at Kol Ami. So if you are considering joining us, and we hope you will, please join. Do not let finances stand in your way. We will make all kinds of arrangements on that, but we would love to have you be part of our community officially and welcome you on June 18th. So, anything else, Rabbi Richard?
No, if you wanted to say a blessing over the menu at Atman's, it's on their website. And experimentation and trying things is a deep, proud part of the Jewish tradition.
Yeah, make it your own. Great.
What time is that? What time on the 22nd?
I think that we're calling it for 7. But we have that day our Lag BaOmer celebration till 6:30, so I don't know if that's realistic. I don't know if 7:30 is too late. That would probably be a little bit better. Do people feel like 7 is better? Or 7:30 is okay?
Wait, for what one?
I've lost the thread. AM? PM?
Is 7:30 p.m. for deli dinner at Atman's on May 22nd.
And,
We
and
can do it?
because
That should be good. Send out
Okay.
an email so that I can add it to my
Yes, will
calendar.
do. I will do.
And I guess one footnote to that, since there are vegetarians in many modern groups, you might think a deli can't accommodate a vegetarian, but yes, it can, in style and taste.
Great. That sounds great. Yes, we will make it work. All right, folks. So anybody who'd like to stay on, talk about prayer, talk about ways into prayer, talk about anything related to synagogues and prayers, please stay on. And otherwise, everyone else, a Shavua Tov, a good week. So let me first ask if there's any questions that, we touched on a whole lot of stuff and couldn't get to a whole lot of stuff today, but questions from your own experience and your reading and your venturing into Jewish worship spaces, anything that you'd like to raise or discuss.
Erin and I have a question. She just had to go give her father a phone call. But recently we attended our niece's bat mitzvah in Chicago, which was co-led by her parents. That is our niece's parents, my wife's brother, and his wife, who is a rabbi, Rebecca Milder, in Chicago. So co-led by them and Dan Liebenson. Some of you may know him from the podcast Judaism Unbound.
That's right. Yeah.
He is something of a kind of an iconoclast in the way that he thinks about services and what direction things should go in. And for our niece's bat mitzvah, they replaced most of the prayers with Bob Dylan songs.
Wow.
They didn't just use the tunes; they replaced the text. They found songs that in some way were related to the traditional prayers, but which I thought was interesting. But they mentioned in the service that the Aleinu is controversial, which was surprising to us, and I guess that's really what my question is about.
Yeah, so Aleinu is kind of controversial for a couple of different reasons. Aleinu, folks, is the prayer that's recited at the end of the services when you're kind of on your way out into the world, and it's Aleinu l'shabeach. It's upon us to praise the Master of the world. Although we often in our communities think it is for us to act for God in the world, to do God's work in the world. So it's controversial in the first paragraph because the traditional version contains some real put downs of the non-Jewish world. So it disses, what is the proper word? It disrespects other nations, and thanks God for not making us like the nations of the world. And traditionally, it said who bow down to empty gods, and anyway, it has a kind of nasty history that way, and it was somewhat banned, and there's a whole history of that paragraph. In the Reconstructionist movement, we've replaced that dreadful language with that God has given, something positive. God has given us the Torah and planted the seed, and planted the seeds of eternity in our midst through the Torah. So I never think that one should bring in other nations in order to just slam them. I think that's a reprehensible part of Jewish tradition. So I'm very glad Reconstructionist Judaism has taken an editing pen to that, a red pen to that. In the second paragraph, though, and this hasn't really been tackled yet, it essentially has a kind of colonialist Jewish triumphalist mentality that like all the nations of the world will eventually bow down to our God. And I don't think that's really fair to other people either. I mean, we don't really insist that everybody become Jewish. It's far from it. And so it's, you can interpret it as being, well, that they'll come to see the light and that, they'll choose good over evil.
I understood that as more of a Noahide mindset.
You can understand it that way.
Similar to like Islam, where
that everybody has their place in kind of this more universalist version. But I don't think we would be thrilled with that language if it appeared elsewhere. So for me, I just pick out these 4 words from it. L'takein olam b'malchut Shaddai, that we fix the world so that it manifests the divine. And for me, that's the second paragraph, and I don't recite the rest of it. And I do recite the last words of it, which are, on that day, the world will be one. Like Troy just said, people will live with truth and justice and goodness and peace. So yeah, so there is a controversialness. On the other hand, it's one of the few prayers that most Jews know. So I never like to scrap prayers that everybody actually can sing with. So but the Bob Dylan, that's an interesting idea. Richard, any thoughts?
My first Talmud teacher knew all of Bob Dylan by heart, which is no small feat. And we were talking about it once, and he said, well, I learned to chant long portions of the Talmud, and that helped me get into Dylan. So all power to your niece. I think the other thing I would want to add is that, as with Aleinu, just because prayers are often deep and beautiful in ancient poetry doesn't mean they can't be rewritten with the insights and desires of our own lives and our own time. A few years ago at Kol Ami, we were learning the morning blessings together. And there's one there that's a sticking point for many people, the Orthodox version, which is not in our Siddur, says, thank you for, men would say, thank you for not making me a woman. And women would say a different prayer, for making me how I am. We were rankled by those alternatives, particularly in a period of history where the trans movement is rising and important to welcome and recognize. And we replace that prayer with words that say, thank you for making us a free people. And different variations, as in music, as in live, strike people differently. I've begun using the version that class wrote together the next morning, and have been doing it every day since. So as Rabbi Gila said, there are alternative prayer formulations. There's also a non-binary Hebrew project that is rewriting all of the prayers in gender inclusive, gender expansive language. And its first efforts don't trip easily off the tongue, but gratify the heart. So we'll see where all of that goes.
Takes a little while to trip off the tongue, but I don't want to make light of this, Jason. The Bob Dylan service. I think that Judaism has some real difficulties in the area of prayer. Clearly, looking at the number of people who come to services each week, it's not meeting the needs of most Jews. The Hebrew barrier is enormous. People are not learning Hebrew, as they grow up anymore. Or if so, just very basic decoding and not with any kind of real comfort in the language. And so it's very hard to know what to do. On the other hand, when you move to something like that, the Bob Dylan service, there doesn't seem to be that link to tradition and to authenticity and to holiness, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe there is. But, it's also very difficult, and it very much becomes part of, just what the service leader does rather than a shared. Well, maybe it is more shared. I don't know. It's something that I wrestle with constantly is what do we do about our prayers? Because there are treasures there. But it's very hard to share that treasure. Troy raised the question of how do you get into the davening and so there's a couple things. So the cantillation marks that you mentioned are for the Torah. So, and that's what kids learn when they're learning to become mitzvah. So they study with a tutor and they learn how to chant the Torah with the particular chant. Each of the sacred books of Judaism has its own chant. So there's a special melody for Torah, there's for Haftorah, for the different scrolls like Esther and Lamentation. They each have their own melody. But also different communities have different melodies. So Yemenite Torah reading, Sephardi Torah reading, Ashkenazi, just incredibly gorgeous, different modalities that are available. And all of this is on, you can find on the internet if you ever want to explore, or any cantor in the country would be thrilled to teach you. So, but for davening, for the prayers, so there's also like a website like Virtual Cantor where every prayer is sung, and you can practice the chant. There we call it nusach. Nusach means like the melody, the tune. And there are nusach for weekday and a nusach for Shabbat. One is in a major key, Shabbat, and the minor key on weekdays. And special nusach for holidays. So there's a whole sort of system of how to do that. We don't follow formalities so much at Kol Ami. We just use whatever melodies we are comfortable with. And, in our morning minyan, we just encourage people to explore and to develop. But there is a whole technical side to this. But it's not an impossibility to learn. The main thing that helps is to go to minyan or go to Shabbat services, and they become part of your, they just like earworms. They start to inhabit your brain. And then with a little bit of help from recordings, it gets easier to actually daven with that. But when you're davening alone, you don't need to sing anything. You can just go as traditionally you're supposed to actually vocalize each word. So in a kind of a whisper, so that you're hearing every word vocalized. Many people just read it with their eyes only and not with their mouth. But if you look at an Orthodox synagogue, you'll see people going, like you'll see them actually vocalizing every syllable. So yeah, but very fast.
And related to that, I guess I just recently came across the concept that you're supposed to read the words, not just say them. That like I always thought it was good when I finally didn't have to look at the book. I knew the words, but you're supposed to look at the book and read the words off the page. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
For Torah, you're supposed to read the Torah. So, you're not supposed to just memorize the Torah reading and recite it. You're supposed to actually read it from the Torah. For the words in the Siddur, I don't know. I'm not sure that you really have to. For me, I mean, maybe that is a tradition that you're looking at the book. I really think once you know the words by heart, you are really liberated in a wonderful way to breathe the words, to kind of, get to a different level. So that may be true. I just don't go along with it.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful. It's a tradition I was taught, and I sort of kind of do go along with it. With the twist that because my sight is, I have a vision disability, I go along with reading while I know the words by heart. So I'll remember them when I lose more vision, which may happen or may not. And the reason that tradition has some traction with me. It's certainly not obligatory. But what gives it traction for me is that when I read something that I already know, it frees me up to see new things in it. The way that a shape of a letter or a particular spelling carries a nuance of meaning, or something stands out to me, asks for emphasis that it might not have it on a different day because of what's going on in my life or where I am in my life. I think the prayers, as much as there are barriers, there's learning that over time can happen. They're also welcoming. They welcome us in. They have something to say to us, or at least that's been my experience with it. So I encourage people to try it out and see what happens on your own, in a minion, whatever. In a minion, traditional minion and a kolami minion, people can find ourselves carried away by a prayer. So much so that everyone else is doing one thing and you're stuck on another, because that's where you need to be on that given day. That's some of the magic of it.
Some of our Hasidic rabbis talk about seeing God peeking through the letters of the prayers. You know, that it's just a beautiful image.
So, I'm changing the topic. Why did everyone just the opportunity to stop me? Okay.
Go for it.
So I'm self-conscious about the pronunciation. Baraka? Am I saying it right?
Bracha. Yeah, bracha.
Oh, bracha. Because they can be about anything, and because they have a clear and simple format, is there like is coming up with fresh ones kind of like a skill? Is there like a little regard? Is there like a little bit of intra community regard for like, oh, that person's really good at like coming up with an elegant braha?
Oh, it's such a great question. So we totally encourage people to come up with their own brachas, and the tradition is absolutely forbids it. So,
Oh, I didn't realize that part.
just so you know.
Okay, good to know.
We don't follow traditions, you know, in everything. So we follow them, but we don't let them have like the Reconstructionist version is the past has a vote, not a veto. So I think people, you know, I mean, the rabbis wanted to hold authority closely, and religious authority especially, and they weren't keen on people just, you know, coming up with their own blessings. So they did not encourage that. They encouraged people more to use the ones that they had authorized and to make them breathe into new situations. But in our own day, we have found so many things in life that really need a bracha and that haven't gotten one. So that the project of creating new blessings is very, very alive and well. You know, I think you can try it on your own and see what works. Like Chinese food, you know, that could be it. It could be maybe a little more elegant, but but you know, also to see what works, what feels like an offense, what feels like this needs a bracha, what feels like this is a way to mark this moment to complete that circuit, as I would say.
Yeah. So about a month ago, I was so moved by something that I wrote one, and so I wanted to share it with folks who might be interested, because like, you know, I like language, right? There's like design work behind this, right? And I'm like, here, look at the cool thing I did. But this was a month ago. I don't remember if I shared it before. Please, please, someone stop me if I brought this up before. And like,
Nope, no, I don't believe so.
okay. So the situation is thus. I'm reading a book for class about the oral history of Black Americans during the Great Migration, which was the great, if you don't know, it's the great shift of the Black populations out of the South, roughly between 1920 and 1970, give or take. And unbeknownst to a lot of people, there's a significant chunk of that migration that moved into Appalachia. There was there's like kind of a two-step migration pattern where like the first generation out of the South and into Appalachia, and then the second generation who were in company towns, which fucking sucked, out of Appalachia somewhere else, right? But so the thing here is that this is one of those sort of like undiscovered pieces of history. This book is a milestone in oral history, in sort of revealing these experiences that weren't hidden, but you know, the passage of time and the movement of power had obscured them and their stories and like the value of their lives in this way. And so doing the work specifically of oral history to connect to people, to recover that, not recover because it's known, right? But to make that knowledge more visible, like really got to me, especially because this was also a personal project for the author, being descended from these same communities. And also because she rolled up to one of the biggest academic archives about this sort of thing in the South, and discovered that they had nothing on this. So she bullied them into starting their own sub-archive about it based on all the stuff she discovered, right? And so this idea, not discovered, but you know what I mean, right? Anyway, and so this idea about sort of knowing the world and seeing it in this way, after chewing on it for a long time, because this is, after chewing on it for a long time, I came up with a bracha, because that sort of movement in the world is very personal to me. I wrote, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, who strides alongside the world, who makes the work of creation and patterns its illumination.
Wait a minute, one more time, Patrick.
Sure. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, who strides alongside the world, who makes the work of creation and patterns its illumination.
God, that's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And so there's design work here, right? Like I know the second clause is supposed to be an acknowledgement of God's sort of sovereignty or like creatorness or kingship. And I'm just sort of conceptually not super on board with that. You feel it's about the hierarchy, not huge on the hierarchy. But if you are, you can kind of like squint and fudge it a little bit and end up at like astride the world or bestride the world, and you're like, eh, close enough. But also because this is specifically a blessing conceptually about going into places, right? And so that's why I did it like that. And then I found online who makes the work of creation is a translation of an existing bracha about
Yep.
like seeing something wondrous in nature. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And then the last part, who patterns its illumination, is about the knowing, right? And sociology, which is what I'm studying, what I'm invested in here in this context emotionally, is sometimes described as the intersection of history and biography. And so from that lens, I thought putting those two notions together like that was very
Patrick,
descriptive.
I would love for you to, first of all, share that blessing with us on the email. And if you don't mind us using it in services, I would love to incorporate it. But I would also encourage you to just write write what you were just saying and how it led you to this blessing. Because I think there would be people who would be very interested in that. So, Yasher Koach, as we say, may your strength increase. May your inspiration increase.
I wasn't expecting that, but
beautiful.
Oh, okay. I'll email you. Sorry, that's not what I was expecting here. Sure.
Beautiful.
There's a story from the Talmud about prayer that comes to mind listening to your absolutely beautiful bracha. So there's an argument between two ancient rabbis about which version of a prayer does one say for drinking water. Rabbi Gila is completely correct. The tradition establishes like this is how you do it. But the rabbis that gave birth to the tradition, argued about what it should be. So there's these two versions of the prayer before drinking water. And a third rabbi comes along and says, well, the thing is that you have to go out and see what people are doing. Go out and see what people are praising. It's one of the most gorgeous principles in the whole Talmud. In Aramaic, it's called pukhazi. Go see what folks are doing and then go do that. So if we live in a time when people are proudly putting the Great Migration back into human history, US history, and seeing how it shapes all of us in ways that we know, in ways that we sort of know, in ways we're just discovering. If that's more and more what people are doing, then maybe that needs to import into our prayers in all the creative ways we can.
Beautiful. All right, folks, let's leave it here today. Pukhazi, go out and learn. Go out and see how to make this your own, how to bring it in. Wonderful. We'll see you. We'll see you, Troy, tomorrow, and hope to see other folks. Gordon, I don't know if you'll be at the security meeting. Wonderful. Okay. And Grace, I hope things are settling in for you. Good to see everyone else. And wow. Till next time.
Thank you. Take care, y'all.
Yep.
Bye.